Hello and welcome. It is Monday, the 25th of April, 2022. I can't believe how fast this year is going. I must admit, it's crazy to think how much, time has gone since COVID kind of started and how the world kind of keeps going. But one of the things that I do, my name's Steve Pugh, is most kind of Mondays, apart from bank holidays here in the UK, I do something called a growth strategy podcast where I try and introduce you to really interesting people from all different backgrounds who I think have genuine kind of knowledge and stuff to share. And we kind of have a chat for about 40 odd minutes to kind of just go through some interesting stuff. And Sophie, who I'm going to introduce you to today, I actually discovered about a year ago on a marketing meetup podcast. And it's a good piece of content when you not only watch the whole thing, but actually you go on and buy the product, which he was talking about, which is something called Freelancer magazine, which I've since gone on to advertising as well. So there's a real kind of link there. But sometimes when you kind of see someone, you kind of instantly kind of relate to them and that kind of thing. And hopefully if you join us today, you can ask Sophie some questions as well. So if you comment in the chat, it should pop up on my screen, which I'll kind of bring in as well. And hopefully I'm going to introduce you to someone that has a really interesting kind of marketing background, has been a freelancer for about 9 years, and give or take a year and a bit ago, launched something called Freelancer magazine on Kickstarter as well. So lots of really great kind of content we're going to talk about. And Sophie, there we go. Everyone can now kind of see you and hear you.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for having me.
Now, I'm always impressed with people with plants in the background as well. I've been told on many a Zoom call that it's a sign of creativity. The more plants you've got, the better.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, just a miracle to keep them alive, really, isn't it? But
I'll let you into a secret, but that one's from IKEA, but don't tell anyone.
Oh.
Would you be happy to give people like a quick kind of 30, 60 second intro just about you to set the scene before we kind of go back into more of the story and all of the interesting stuff we're going to talk about? Is that cool?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Sophie Cross. Kind of the biggest thing I do at the moment, or the thing that takes up most of my time, is Freelancer magazine. So it's a print first magazine, a quarterly one that's dedicated to the life and businesses of B2B and creative freelancers. So I'm the editor and the founder. And as well as that, and what I've been doing for kind of 9 years, is a freelance marketer, and which sort of turned into copywriting, content writing, so freelance writing as well. My background is largely in travel and hospitality. So up until 9 years ago, I was working in quite corporate roles in across travel and hospitality. But when the pandemic hit, I lost a lot of client work. And that was kind of the catalyst for me wanting to make my own things, really kind of focus on that. I'd always sort of, for the last couple of years, I'd been interested in productizing my freelance business, if there was a way to do that. And that kind of blank canvas and kind of disaster of the pandemic gave me a bit of a kick up the butt to do that. So it started with making online marketing courses, and then it turned into the magazine. So yeah, that's me.
Honestly, I love it. And it's the sign of a good entrepreneur, or anyone, that when something happens. And also, I'm going to give a shout out to the Freelancer mug, which I've got here, which was a gift which you sent me last year, I think. I love it. Anyway, but it's a sign of anyone, when something happens, that you learn to pivot and adapt and change and that kind of thing. And especially to do something so ambitious as launch a magazine. And one of the things I really love about it, and shout out to Angela as well, is it's the creativity and the fact that most of your editions are different, even to do with the page shape and size and stuff, which is so kind of cool. And it's, we'll go on to the magazine a bit later, but I think it's a brilliant kind of story to tell, because again, you have a lot of people that even now, a lot of people are going through career change. And I think it's always great to hear from people that have been through a process and are quite honest about the journey that they've kind of done, because you also get so many people that kind of talk full of shit. They preach stuff and they promise a dream which doesn't happen or isn't realistic, and that's one of the reasons I love to kind of be honest about my journey and stuff that we kind of do as well. One of the things I love to do, just because especially when these kind of go onto YouTube, is almost ask you a bit about your childhood and what you were like growing up, because often not so much kids, but when you kind of get to teenage age and you're at school, you start to think about, what do I want to do when I grow up? And often, when I was growing up, okay, we didn't have the internet, but likewise, it's nice to see people on career paths that you could potentially follow. So I always like to go back and almost ask that question. So what were you like at school?
I found school like fairly easy. So I found passing exams fairly easy. Like I was kind of, it was in, you know, I was a bit rebellious and I was into sport and things like that. But I mean, my parents kind of instilled in me that there was an expectation. So I was probably rebellious, but had to be a bit extra sneaky about it. Like I'd climb out my bedroom window and stuff. But yeah, I found passing exams quite easy, which, you know, there's just a big thing with the education system, isn't there? That we're kind of just, that's what we're meant to do is pass exams, and that's not particularly helpful. And even though that obviously suited me because I did have that skill, I also just felt like I didn't really get the point of it beyond that. I wish I'd kind of, you know, I didn't really think about, you know, reading for enjoyment or writing for enjoyment or pursuing any of those things other than kind of sport, because it was just like, oh, let's just, you know, get these boxes ticked, get this assignment done, you know, get this exam done. So yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really know if I was studious. I was just kind of good at leaving things to the last minute.
So perfect for a freelancer then.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. I did realize that when I was, you know, doing a lot more kind of article writing a few years ago, thinking actually I kind of, you know, I trained myself for this. I didn't know I had this skill, but, you know, at university I was writing essays like 1 a.m. the night before, and I don't leave my client work that late. But yeah, deadline thrill seeker, and kind of was, you know, all right at passing exams, but yeah, didn't really see the point of education beyond that. And I think that's kind of common for lots of people, whether they kind of, you know, whether the exams suited them or not really.
I've talked about it in the past that, so I went on to do engineering, but I didn't even necessarily know what that was. I just liked cars, and that was a way to do. And it, you know, I think I've spoken about a lot of people about almost the education and career system. How now I think people have more visibility on that. Looks cool, I could do that, you know. But it's a kind of challenge. And I've got to ask, what sport was it that you were into?
So mainly basketball. Yeah,
Really?
I played basketball at college and at uni and at school. So yeah, I was kind of fell out of it. It's hardest to play sport as an adult, isn't it? When I moved back to London, I did try and get back into it, but to no avail. But yeah, basketball was my main sport.
See, I genuinely didn't know that. And we
I
spoke.
actually went to uni in the northeast as well.
At Newcastle
Uni. Yeah.
What's quite funny is that I would have, because basketball's my sport. I'm a basketball coach.
Oh, awesome.
But I would have played at Newcastle Uni, because I think we're about the same age, when you were there against your men's team. And it was just, but one of the things I love about basketball, for one, it's a real leveler that I guess a lot of sports are, but it's the fact that as soon as you step on the court, it doesn't matter how much money you've got or your background or whatever, it doesn't matter. And all you need is a pair of trainers. And
yeah, for sure.
I never knew that about you. That's quite cool.
Yeah. Well, haven't played for a while, to be fair. So, and I think if you saw me play now, you would never realise that I'd ever played, to be honest.
No, that's cool. I didn't know that. So what did you study at uni?
Business. So yeah, again, you know, was kind of, yeah, it was just like, well, I like business. So yeah, that was just a bit of an obvious choice. But again, I just sort of didn't really get the kind of point of it beyond just choosing something that you kind of thought you know, you might end up doing, and business seemed generic enough to kind of fill that gap.
Can I ask, how did you find the whole university experience? So I grew up in Liverpool and then went to uni in Sheffield, but it was just to be immersed into a completely different culture with different people that are from different places was weird to me. But it was almost, you get to find your group, but then almost find the people that you actually resonate with, as opposed to the people you happen to grow up around. I just don't know how you kind of found the experience.
Oh gosh, I really enjoyed sixth form, so I was like kind of had quite a lot of friends and things like that. And then I thought I was going to love uni, but I actually got put into temporary accommodation because it was my second choice. So I found it really difficult to kind of integrate myself because my course was so big and I wasn't put into student accommodation. I actually found, you know, it was a real shock to me because all of a sudden I was like quite isolated, and that wasn't the experience that I thought that I was going to get. But basketball kind of saved me because that gave me that kind of, you know, group of people. And And I just, gradually got into other things. So I was working up there as well while I was at uni. Like, I loved Newcastle as a city, but the studying experience wasn't what I kind of expected. Do you know what I mean? But you kind of end up finding, different groups of people through different ways. But, it's an amazing way to, sometimes I do think, especially from a business perspective, with those 3 years have been better spent in industry. But it's not really about that, is it? It's not necessarily even about what you learn, or certainly it wasn't for me. It was about getting that independence and, getting those life skills and things like that. So, looking back, I probably got more out of it than learning like about the theory. It was more about life.
I completely agree. And it's funny that, like, it sounds really silly, but in hindsight, when you look back, I feel like I didn't properly like grow up until I was about 24, when I felt that I had like proper adult decisions and I kind of knew what I was doing. And I think what I found quite funny about uni is that you meet a big group of people that, for instance, but the people that almost like developed socially earlier were at a different stage. So for me, it was a really big learning curve that I think, ironically, I was quite naive when I went to uni, and it was just, but it's that learning curve. But it's also great to hear that not everyone, has the great experience, because people might catch this on YouTube and actually relate to that. Because again, it's part of the whole problem with Instagram and social media. If everything you ever see is people saying how perfect things are, for one, you can feel shit because you think, well, actually, I'm not really enjoying it. But it's still great that you found something and you found people to kind of link to kind of find your way through. So then after, what did you do after uni?
So, I mean, I totally agree with that, because it is about laying down those dots. And I just don't think anyone's journey is typically linear. But for instance, for me, going back to university, I did introduction to marketing in my first year. I thought I really liked marketing and got quite a bad grade. And I just assumed that, marketing was advertising, and advertising was for people that were creative. And because I couldn't sort of draw or things like that, it wasn't for me. So I dropped marketing after year one of uni. I graduated university with a 2-1, just about scraped it. So quite a good, result. And then basically went back to being a waitress at Pizza Hut full time, because I was so bad at job interviews. So I was going for like these big graduate training scheme interviews, for Mars and companies like that, and was just completely tanking, because I was just like, didn't really know what. Do you know what? It was only about 2-3 years ago when I went to a kind of client, it was positioned more as an interview for a kind of short-term project. And I really kind of finally, for the first time, got that interviews is really just talking about how good you are at things. And I think for like 15 years, I've been going in and being like fairly self-deprecating and just feeling so nervous. And then I was suddenly like, oh, this is what it's about when someone asks you. So it's taken me ages. So I went back to waitressing at Pizza Hut, and then I thought, God, I can be whatever I want to be, that kind of mantra that we're told. So I trained as a personal trainer, and then I went into being a personal trainer.
Wow.
And I think I always wanted to set up my own business, but, I was kind of like 22, 23 at the time. I'd moved to Brighton. I got a job in a gym and just, had some private clients as well, but just wasn't really mature enough, I don't think, to give setting up my own business a go at that point. I was just too busy kind of spending all my money on going out after work. And in, again, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but, in hindsight, it might have been quite a good business to set up. But
the thing is, all of those things were formative in creating you for doing what you're doing now. It's the same thing that when, oftentimes of challenge, there was a lady who's been on this before on the podcast, and she was homeless for a while. But what it meant was it just gave her the grit and determination to set up what she wanted to do and work so hard, because she knew what it was like to not have it. And the point is, she would have never done that if she didn't go through the tough times. And then likewise, it's always easy in hindsight to say, oh yeah, well, I could have started this earlier, or I could have, but then you probably wouldn't be exactly where you are now. So it's,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's, it's easy to look back on those dots that you laid down and be like, oh, they've all contributed. But at the time, you don't see it.
No, cool. So I know that you started as a freelancer at 29, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's only because I cheated. Basically, you did a brilliant interview with a guy called Ben a few weeks ago, and I read it before I started. But almost, what was the journey? So, at what point did you're obviously doing your fitness, and you were thinking about starting a business, but it wasn't quite the right time, and then you went into a job, I guess, for corporate kind of clients. At what point did you start to get the itch to kind of go freelance again, or how did that kind of play out?
So I don't think I really thought about going freelance, but I was doing these kind of corporate marketing roles. Like I fell into my first one because I ended up I was working in the gym at Hilton, and I was just getting bored of it, giving out towels. So I went to the HR department, and they had I literally, because they were like, I was like, okay, have you got any other jobs? And they were like, well, I was like, I've got a business degree. Like, I wasn't so good at marketing. And they were like, well, we've got PA to the general manager or marketing exec. And I was like, oh, like, did I say I wasn't very good at marketing? And I had a massive backtrack, ended up getting the job as marketing exec for Hilton, worked my way up there, several other jobs. And I think I just always had that itch to start my own business, and was writing like all sorts of different business plans for all sorts of different businesses. And I just had a kind of light bulb moment one day where I thought, well, if I set up a business as a marketer, then, like the startup costs are really low. I actually know what I'm doing. So yeah, I was probably working in corporate roles for sort of 5 or 6 years, and just decided to make the leap. And yeah, went freelancers in marketing.
Because obviously now it's your main target area, that people that kind of do a similar journey. And hello as well, we've had some comments. Out of interest, how much did you plan it? So for instance, when I knew that I wanted to set up on my own, I had another job on the table and it didn't feel right, so I thought I was going to do it. But I'd almost planned to have a certain amount of money in the bank, so that I knew I probably wouldn't earn any money for at least 6 months, at least until you break even and then start growing again. How did you jump straight in, or did you plan to build up a certain amount of cash, or how did you approach it?
I did jump, yeah, and I'm always really impressed when people say they did this, and I think it's just the ideal situation to get those savings in the bank. I had a corporate job I really enjoyed, and decided to leave to go and work with a kind of ex-colleague / sort of friend who ran an agency in Covent Garden, and got there, and within about a week was just like, oh my God, this was a terrible decision. So actually I'd kind of made the leap from corporate, like this kind of, I believe like it's a bit kind of propaganda-y, like, oh, what are you going to do about your, pension and healthcare, and actually all these things that you can still pay into as a freelancer, you can organize for yourself. So I'd made that leap from that sort of super security into another job that I just wanted to give a shot to. And yeah, it was just a big mistake, because this guy had lied to me about like how many clients he had and things like this, and was just it was just awful. And I think that was just like, what have I got to lose? That was just like, well, if he can do it or is trying to do it. So that was just like the easy. So I can't say I went straight from corporate. I had been sort of planning to do it. And I think I kind of thought, okay, well, I'll give agency side a go first. And this sounds fun, like working in Covent Garden. And yeah, then I just thought, oh God, I've got to get out of this, left and set up my own thing from that. And yeah, it's just always sort of worked out. I think there's real power. When you're still employed, you just think, well, where am I going to get work from? But people, when you have made that commitment, when you've kind of got your website, you're telling people, right, I'm doing this now. That's at the point where things kind of start to happen. And yeah, I remember kind of, setting up my own thing, and it was Easter weekend actually. and not having any work, and then kind of getting a text from someone I used to work with saying, hey, like, you know, would you work on this project? And me thinking, well, gosh, I don't have anything else to do. So, and yeah, and always kind of, it was weird. I always find a little bit like when I got my next client, it was at that point I would start to think, oh my God, well, what would I have done if this didn't happen? I almost didn't panic until I got a client, and then thought, oh gosh. But yeah, I was quite fortunate to get a lot of work from kind of ex-employers or like colleagues that I'd worked with that had moved on to other companies. So yeah, I mean, just always be nice to everyone, I think is the motto, is the moral of the story there.
But it's like, you've got to be mad brave to do it, you know, because there's always an easier option, that's a safer option to take a job at someone else. So I always have crazy respect for anyone that does it, but you're completely right. They almost, you know, and again, say personal branding as a term probably wasn't as big 9 years ago as it is now, but it so proves the point of people need to know who Sophie Cross is, and hopefully quite like you and respect that you're good at something, so that then if they ever get the opportunity to hire you, they might do it. And it's just, I think, you know, it's almost, so when I speak to people that want to set up on their own, you know, start building that groundwork so that people know you for something, because it is scary when you see your bank balance going down every month and then you get a little blip. So someone told me that, you know, you'll probably get your first job after like 2-3 weeks, but then you won't get your next one for about 2-3 months. And it's obviously, you get a little win and you think, oh, it's easy this, and then it's like terrible. And then it kind of picks up, and then at a certain point you get to the plateau level where you kind of stop making money every month, you know, as in over what your costs are. And it's just, I think it's important to kind of talk about that. And, you know, I guess now so many of your readers will be in that exact same frame of mind, or they're still in the job and they're thinking about doing it, and almost, oh, that's how, what happened to Sophie. And, you know, again, a lot of people take adversity where they take a job and it didn't work out, or they get made redundant, or COVID happens, to make that leap. And it's, you know, I spoke to some guys the other day on Thursday, and you've kind of got nothing to lose. What worst case, you'll get another job, because if you're good, you know, you're employable. But I always have crazy kind of mad respect. And then how did you find the process of almost like, what was your first year or 2 years like as a freelancer?
I just love, I mean, I really wanted to get a dog, so that kind of helped with that. That was kind of one of the main goals, was like, oh, amazing work from home. I loved, you know, this isn't quite true, but, you know, a friend made a joke the other day that always sticks in my mind of like, oh, you know, it's so great to have the freedom of to choose which 16 hours a day you work. And of course I don't work 16 hours a day, but there is a truth in that. There's kind of like, you know, all this freedom to freelancing, but, you know, it is, you do still work really hard, and you do work longer hours. And in some ways, you know, you don't, you know, I did find it as employed, you probably can turn your email off for 2 weeks or a week and go on holiday. And that's kind of the culture, is, you know, it's probably a bit more acceptable in a lot of roles, but I find that really difficult as a freelancer. So you don't, you know, you can't shut down in that respect. But for me, the freedom to work, you know, to not feel like I have to be somewhere at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, that kind of sense of freedom, the freedom that you can pick and choose clients. And of course it is hard to say no to work, and, you know, it takes time to kind of learn all of these things, but that freedom is just something that I would never like forgo now. Would find it really hard to give up. And I think I've always been like quite an independent person, and you know, never really kind of like being told what to do too much. So I think it kind of suits my personality in that respect.
No, because like before the call, when we spoke about this, and it's funny that, you know, some people will just see me as this annoying guy that does live streams or podcasts, but it's almost that when I do my client work, I don't know if it is technically anxiety, but I feel sick when I know that I've got stuff to do and they're waiting for it, even though it's within a perfectly reasonable time frame. And it's just, that sits with me 7 days a week. As soon as sends an email in, it goes there. But the thing is, when you, for me at least, when you feel like you're trying to build something that you're passionate about, it is easily, I work twice as hard as I ever have in any job, but I kind of enjoy it more, even though I get paid a lot less. Does that sound really stupid? And it's almost like, why would you choose to do that? But I've just got faith, and it's great to kind of just share that and hear from different people, because again, it is tough and lonely when you see all these people talking about all these great stuff. and you kind of,
for sure.
you can be at home. So then fast forward through. So can we talk about the magazine?
Yeah, of course.
So where did the idea come from?
So yeah, I was making courses. I was making marketing courses because I didn't really have much client work, and then I sort of decided to use that as an opportunity to focus on that. And yeah, I joined freelance communities online a couple of years before, which was just, groundbreaking for me. I just, I had worked probably as a freelancer for 5 or 6 years, maybe a bit less, 5 years, and not really ever thought about connecting with other freelancers. But yeah, joined Content Club UK, which is like a weekly chat on Twitter for people that kind of work in content or like content, interested about it. And obviously, because it was the pandemic, we were just online so much more. So like these communities, especially where we were kind of relying on each other for support because, things were changing so much or we didn't have clients, it was just like in them the whole time, like on Twitter, on Slack, on chats, on Hangouts. And I think I was just like a lot more tuned into things because I was making the courses as well. So I was kind of looking at not just like having chats with friends and supporting people, but just kind of really looking at what questions people were asking. And yeah, it was New Year's Day 2021.
I love how you lose track of the years because I do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, it's hard when it's New Year's Day as well because you're like, which day was it? It just popped into my head. I mean, I've loads of ideas have popped into my head like this before. So I think you need to give it a few days, to be like, is this going to be the idea? But actually, Ange and I had been making a magazine for a client, for a hotel client. And that had got pulled in the pandemic. So again, it was kind of like lots of dots. Like I knew we could make a magazine. It wasn't like a kind of customer facing B2B magazine. It was kind of largely promoting like the different hotels and what was going on and London as a destination really. But I knew that we had a process and I knew that we worked really well together. So yeah, I called her probably like I think I texted her on like the 2nd of January, thinking I can't text her on New Year's Day. I was like, hey, do you want to make a magazine? So yeah, it just felt like I just knew that the other thing about being part of the communities was I knew that one didn't exist because I knew that I would have heard of it if it did. So yeah, the idea really came from that. And as I look back now, I think, all the times I've been trying to think of business ideas, and I just think actually my best advice would be if you are trying to think of a business idea, think about what community ideally you would want to serve and be part of those communities and listen to people. I know it kind of sounds obvious, but yeah, that would be my advice looking back in hindsight, because I didn't sort of purposefully do it like that. But I think that probably is quite a good process for, thinking of a business idea or spotting where the gaps are and like looking for what questions people are asking.
Because that is obviously the whole essence of marketing. It's understanding the customer and what they want and need and desire. And obviously one of the things I think is really interesting as well when you were looking about the pricing for the magazine as well. So we'll touch on Kickstarter in a second. But it's £12 per quarter, is that correct?
Yes, 10 if you subscribe, but 12 if you buy an individual copy.
No,
and that's print or digital. Yeah.
Because I've got 2 here. My new one hasn't quite arrived yet. I think it takes a little bit longer.
No, it's gone out today.
Cool.
I've got a copy though.
Very cool.
Oh, it kind of matches the wall. Yeah, it should land on Thursday for the first people.
No, cool. Honestly,
Wednesday or Thursday, yeah.
Because like when you're trying to come up with a magazine, how often did you have a set? So obviously when I do these interviews, I have a set structure that I kind of do, and that's the main theme. But then I kind of just riff and see where it goes in the conversation. With the magazine, again, do you have the same kind of thing? So you have the letters page at the start, then you do different articles. I'm just like, what's the process to kind of pull issue 6, which I guess will be the next one, together?
So I'm trying to improve that process the whole time. Not that it was ever kind of terrible, but we do have regular features. But for instance, next issue, I'm going to try and move. So at the moment, our pagination has never been the same. So, if we have a regular feature, it might be on a different page than it was the last issue. And it's just stuff like that, always trying to improve a little bit. And I actually just finished yesterday reading the E-Myth Revisited. Have you read that?
Yeah.
Oh, it's probably the best business book I've ever read. And I was already again thinking about, you know, how can we standardize? How can we move forward in the future to make this not just me? And obviously, you know, cash flow is important in that respect. So you can't just, you know, although it would be ideal just to be able to outsource different parts of it, that's not quite realistic yet. But yeah, just to kind of think, you know, I'm trying to write down what those processes are, and I'm trying to, you know, automate the parts that I can automate, or give a bit more standardization. And it sounds kind of a bit reluctant to use that word because it sounds a bit boring, but I think now we're kind of 5 issues under our belt, you can then afford to, you know, look at standardizing some more parts of it. But yeah, we have themes kind of for the next few issues. We have like our regular features. Then we have kind of slots for, you know, our non-regular features. And yeah, it's just about really thinking about what we want to cover. What, you know, we think a lot about diversity. So in terms of, you know, not just kind of skin color, but also age. You know, it's really easy to make a magazine that, you know, I live in London, so we're trying to make it not too London centric. We have a worldwide audience, we have a global audience. So it's about making it not just UK centric, but also kind of keeping the target market in mind, because most of our audience is UK based. So it's kind of thinking about diversity, you know, in terms of industry and things like that. So in lots of different kind of, you know, categories, you know, not just maybe the ones that are most obvious. So yeah, I think a lot about that. And also because, you know, I think it's just really interesting to learn off different types of people, right? So even if you're a copywriter, you don't just want to hear about what other copywriters are doing. It actually is really interesting to hear how, I don't know, like a DJ might run their freelance business, or we had a drag queen, or things like this. So yeah, it's about trying to keep it as interesting as possible. We also say that we try and make it inspirational without being overly aspirational. So I didn't want to make a magazine that was just like people, like digital nomads working from like Bali and Mexico City and living this kind of life that just seemed completely unattainable. I think like lots of magazines and things do that already. So, you know, I did want to, while filling it with inspirational stories, I also wanted people to feel like
you can relate to them.
Yeah, absolutely. It was relatable and it's attainable.
Well, I think you've achieved all those points. And I love how your nails match the cover as well. I did notice.
I know, yeah, pink and green. I should do this like, yeah.
Just be subtle and see if nobody else notices or not. But no, like, but what I find interesting is just, it's when you read through and you read stuff. And I love the Christmas party, by the way. It was a really nice touch that during COVID, I didn't otherwise get one. But there's a lot of the details that I think people do relate to. And it was just, no, I love it. Obviously, I pay to advertise and stuff. And I get it. I like it. I love what you do with it. And I know how difficult it is. But then likewise, the fact that you keep innovating and changing and tweaking and stuff. Like, for instance, it was this issue. The fact that each different page is a different page size. Like, I know how difficult that will be when you make a physical print book. But likewise, it's so cool to kind of, you didn't have to do that, but you wanted to. And I think people recognize that. And I think that's kind of quite cool. One of the kind of ways that you funded the magazine was on a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Do you mind if we talk about that for a bit?
No,
because again, I know nothing about Kickstarting. And it's just like, what's the process? Like, how does it work? That kind of thing. And how did you use it for the magazine?
So I'd only used Kickstarter as someone who'd backed a couple of projects before, so I didn't know crazy amounts about it either. But I'd probably set up a few businesses before, had ideas for businesses where, you know, I'd read Lean Startup years and years ago, and I'd read these books and just then set up businesses and kind of not put, really bought into the minimum viable product kind of, process, and then just not done it. So I was like, right, this time I'm going to make sure people want it before I make it. And, it's useful, super useful to have the money up front, basically. And it wouldn't have been possible. But main thing, I mean, the great thing for us about Kickstarter was that we could get the money up front and prove that people wanted it. So if we didn't get the money, people didn't want it, right? So, and I guess a lot of the time with Kickstarter, so what you do is you have to set a target amount, and if you don't make that amount, you don't get any of the money. So that was a really hard decision to make. And, you know, even probably until a few days before, I was like, oh, I just set it for like $6,000. And then I was like, no, I'll try for like $8,000, and just kept kind of remodeling. And we set it for nearly 13, but ended up on 18.
Mm-hmm.
So that was amazing. But obviously you're also thinking, because there's a big, if people are going to get behind it, they're going to get behind it kind of until you get to your amount, and then that's going to kind of drop off. So you have to kind of think about it like, okay, well, I want to set it at, you know, it's really hard to decide, and I don't know how, you know, how you would do that for sure. But a lot of the time you give your backers rewards. Mm-hmm. So you say, right, if you donate, or if you give £10, you might get this. So for instance, if you were going to set up a bakery, you might say, okay, well, if you give us £10, you'll get a tote bag. And if you give us £50, you'll get, you know, a basket of bread when we open or something. But the good thing for us was we only sold the magazine through the Kickstarter. So we didn't sort of give other rewards. The only rewards we gave was the magazine, so, and advertising space. So I think that was kind of good to prove that people wanted it, mm-hmm. as well as, you know, of course there was still a bit of goodwill in there, but yeah, it was kind of good just to be able to, it made everything a lot simpler as well, to just give away the product as the reward.
Mm-hmm. And so, I guess, did you have to give up equity or anything? Like, is it just a case of
you don't.
People donate 20 quid and they get 2 magazines for that, and then you ship them out, and then you're kind of clear and done? Is that kind of how?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's they back you, and they choose a reward basically, and then they get that reward. No equity.
I think it's there's so much stuff out there that you have a lot of people that do want to start a whatever, and they're trying to figure out, how do I pay for it? What do I do? And it's just, you know, often I genuinely didn't know the answer. I'd looked into it. I'd even, you know, been on the Kickstarter page, but I didn't quite get it. And sometimes there's so much value in just being able to hear from someone that has done it. Even if they tell you the exact thing that you already knew, you feel better just because you've heard them say it. It's a really silly thing. Can I ask you about freelancers, just because it's a topic that I think is really interesting? Like, what would you say the top kind of 3 things that freelancers are kind of struggle with in 2022?
Gosh,
is that too big a question?
Oh gosh, I mean, I think it's just so much better to be connected to people, right? So if you're isolated as a freelancer, how on earth do you know what to charge? How on earth do you know kind of what those benchmarks are in terms of like what you should be kind of accepting from clients and things like that? So I'd just say that, you know, all of these things that you do struggle with, and probably, you know, the main one is always like imposter syndrome and mindset and things like this. I think, you know, I know it's the same for employed people as well, but I suppose those things tend to become kind of exacerbated because you do work on your own so often. So I'd say, you know, freelancers probably struggle with being isolated a lot of the time, and then that kind of being isolated leads to problems with other things because you're maybe inside your own head quite a lot of the time. And I'd say that, you know, even when you are talking about these things, even when you are kind of thinking, oh, maybe I should put my rates up, or you know, I shouldn't, you know, I should have these exact deliverables, and I shouldn't, you know, I should set boundaries. You know, it's still really, really hard. Or I should say no if it's not my perfect client. Like, that isn't realistic, you know, and it doesn't happen overnight. But getting yourself in communities with other people will help you get there, like, eventually. So I think, you know, I think setting boundaries and you know, I found it, and it's taken me ages, but kind of charging higher rates kind of does make your clients treat you better, and all these things that you just never really think will happen. But, you know, when you finally get to that point, you're like, oh, okay, yeah. Or like, you know, you finally say no to that client that, I don't know, it's just taking up loads of your time, but it's maybe not earning you, like making you the most money, or is a bit stressful. Like, there's so much power in that. So yeah, I'd say get yourself some support though, get yourself part of communities, and you know, get people to bounce ideas off and things like that.
I completely agree. I think it's so important that when I had the same, that, you know, I've had the same rates for 2-3 years now, and, you know, cost of living and stuff going up, and I've been scared to put my rates up because it's like, well, I know my clients aren't in the best position, so I don't want to take the piss. But then, and, you know, I get it, I struggle with it, and I completely agree that part of the reason I do the podcast is I like to talk to people. That likewise, it can be quite lonely to be stuck in a room, and it's for me, although I'm on Twitter, I'm not quite into it in the same way some people are, because I like to talk to people. I like to hear people's voices. And it's that balance of, you know, the ability to communicate and hear someone's backstory and emotion in their voice and stuff that for me, you can't get in text. It's part of the reason I love to do this. But I completely agree with everything that you've said about all of the challenges that people face and trying to figure out what to do. And I find just talking to people does really help. So I really can agree with that. And hopefully it also supports the whole community element of the magazine and the stuff behind it. And you have the Dunker as well, which comes out every 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, so fortnightly newsletter. So it's kind of like some helpful links about freelancing and business and creativity, just to kind of, you know, short and snappy. You can click on the ones that you like the look of, and, you know, have a cup of tea and a biscuit at the same time. So yeah, that's our fortnightly newsletter for freelancers.
What's your dream for the business?
I think my dream now is to keep growing it. I mean, and not just in terms of sales, but in terms of a team like that, you know. Yeah, this is kind of the process I'm trying to go through now. I mean, literally from having finished this book yesterday, is, you know, turn it into a business that is not just kind of me and Ange essentially, and you know, a few other people, and just keep growing it in that way. And
can I share the story about when I reached out about the author of each section?
Oh yes, please do.
And because that I really resonated, and I'll tell you why I resonate with it. So I buy the magazine, I subscribe, that kind of thing, and it's brilliant. There's a comment bit and I emailed in saying, Sophie, just out of interest, in most magazines, it's like, this article was written by Joe Blogs, and this one was Sophie, and this one was so-and-so. And you kind of replied and said, yeah, it's kind of all me. And I was like, but for me, I would put your name on all of them because people would love it even more. But the reason why I relate to what you're talking about is that everything I do at the Roadmap is all me. The camera work, the editing, writing the book, like everything. So I get it more than most people. And I think it's people underestimate both how much stuff for me, I think a lot of people, when they set up in business, the mistake they make is they outsource too much stuff that there isn't any money left over to kind of pay themselves. And from your article with Ben that I kind of read, I paid myself last year about £15,000 because all my money that was earned was going back into stuff. And it's that tricky boundary, because often the revenue that you earn is the oxygen for the business to put back in. But then you're like, well, when do I pay myself and how much? And I find that I struggle with that I have certain non-negotiable, it's a bank balance. And when I go below a certain point, I'll pay myself. But otherwise, I will go as long as I humanly can without paying myself. But I think it's something that people genuinely do kind of, you know, struggle with. And it was something that I saw, but I still stand by the fact that people would love it even more if, you know, that kind of thing.
I mean, we have Penny, who's the guest editor of this one. So her name is on a lot of the articles. And yeah, so and I think the thing is that it's not that I don't think, you know, it's not that I think I have to do everything. I'm definitely kind of beyond that point. I know, you know, you do go through this vicious cycle sometimes of kind of like, you know, thinking, oh, I'll outsource something, and then thinking, oh God, it would just be easier if I did it all myself. And sometimes from a cash perspective or from a time perspective, that does, you know, you do have to kind of fight that or make decisions based on it. But, you know, I do know it's not that I think that no one else can do it. It's not that I think that it wouldn't be better with more people involved, because I 100% do. And yeah, that's kind of my goal, to kind of get to that point and
But I love it.
keep
And
working towards it.
Same. It's ironically that I'm not doing this to make money, which sounds really stupid. And it's just, but I though, and this is one of the things that I have found actually, is that when I first set up, you worry so much, or at least I did, about what other people think. And the irony is, even I know business owners that make £500,000 profit a year, but they love and respect the hustle for anyone that even tries to do anything, because they've been there. And the truth is, the people that really get it and love it, and the people that you want to be around, respect the heart. They get it, and I get it, and I just love everything about what you kind of do, and the creativity Angela and that come up with. And I can't wait to read issue 5 as well.
Oh, thank you.
To kind of finish off, because I'm sure you have to go. Is that cool? What's the best piece of advice you ever had?
Oh my gosh.
Your one before was excellent. So when I edit this up, we can just take that if you want.
What was that?
I'm normally quite sharp on something. It was, I can't remember. It was, but
well, I've got so many now. I have like this, like I put like a little, I have another newsletter, so it's called Make It Monday, and it's about kind of helping freelance, like it's like banging the drum for freelancers or anyone creative or anyone to make their own things. So I always put like a little mantra in that, so like a weekly mantra of like what I'm trying to repeat to myself. So one that I've heard recently that I really like was kind of like, I don't mind what happens. I really like that, but and not from a case of like, obviously that isn't the case in everything in life, but, and you know, I also believe in trying to be quite strategic and trying to be quite commercial, but I think from kind of just letting go of the things that you can't control and, you know, enjoying the journey, like from that perspective, I really like that as kind of a piece of advice, kind of repeating to yourself like, well, look, if you don't mind what happens, it can allow you to kind of go for things like a lot, you know, easier. I think you were so right about the hardest thing is your perception of what other people's perception is of you. And you know, to be able, you know, just to try and remove yourself from a situation is just so important, because you know, different, you know, I worry about it, like, and it's ridiculous because, you know, I could probably fall over in the street and not be too embarrassed about it. But for some reason, I just hate the idea of public speaking, like in person. You know, some days I worry like, oh my God, people probably think I'm rolling in it. Other days I worry, oh God, people probably think I'm not growing it fast enough. It's like, it doesn't even make any logical sense, I think. And everyone, you know, worries about different things. Everyone has ways more important things to think about than what you're doing. So yeah, I just think to kind of be able to let go of some things is really important.
I think it's, and you know, even though I'm a man, I feel exactly the same. And the funny thing is that if you put yourself in your shoes, obviously within your network, there's lots of people that you know. If you're brutally honest, how many times on average day do you think about Joe Blogs? Probably never. The point is, we always worry far more. People probably didn't even think about Sophie Cross today, but actually,
yeah, absolutely.
But I think that's the thing, is that for me, it's the moral intent behind what you're trying to do. I know that there's people that's going to absolutely hate me, and some people are going to quite like you. But it's almost where, as long as I'm doing my best, and I think it's a Cub Scout thing from growing up, is that I will happily do my best, and if it fails, it fails. But I tried. And I'll take that risk, and I'm just getting.
But that's like, I don't mind what happens, isn't it? Like, you know, I think that's yeah. There's something about that, isn't there? Just doing your best and enjoying the journey.
Yeah, cool. And my last question: if you were to give advice to your younger self, so you could pick you at school climbing out the window, or at uni, or when you first set up, or when you're in the corporate job, or even when you went to Covent Garden and it didn't quite work out. If you were to give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
This question is so difficult, isn't it? I was thinking I'm going to go a bit left field on this and say I hated being told what to do so much that I probably wouldn't have listened even to my older self. I mean, you know, it makes me sound like a right arse, which I probably, you know, wasn't. But, you know, I did kind of have a bit of an objection to being told what to do. I was thinking about this earlier, realistically. I mean, I think a lot about now just what advice I give myself now. You know, you're just trying to think every day, like, what's the best advice I can take now and put into practice. Okay, so completely kind of, it seems unrelated to business, but as someone who has just started trying to run again, and as someone who used to be able to run relatively well, you know, has done you know, marathons and things like that, and just didn't even really think they were that fit at the time. My advice to my younger self would be like, just maybe don't stop running, even though actually I've probably stopped about 5 or 6 times now and had to start from scratch. But I think a lot at the moment about, you know, trying to stay healthy, because I just think it's so easy not to when you set up a business. And I just think, you know, I'm just trying to kind of get back into training and things like that. So I'm going to come at it from that perspective and just tell my younger self, do you know what, you are actually like quite fit now, so maybe just like try and keep at a level, like keep some of that up, because it's going to be, you're going to absolutely hate yourself for stopping when you have to try and start again.
No, it's awesome. And what I always find quite funny is that when I kind of pick the guests, the people I want to speak to, I often pick them because I've seen them around. I think there could be something interesting there. But often when you talk to them, there's so many core values and similarities that I didn't know the basketball thing, but and it's funny that I think you inherently resonate with certain people that you see around. And obviously I discovered you in this room watching you talk to someone else, but it was just, you will never make that connection if you didn't do that marketing meetup podcast or whichever. And I think it's that balance between, even if you find it a little bit uncomfortable to do, you find your own tribe, you find your own people that you kind of relate to. And what I find quite funny is I can think of about 3 or 4 people who told me in the last 24 hours, I'm really looking forward to this, I'm really looking forward to seeing Sophie and seeing what she's, but you probably don't even know those people. But the point is they know you and they do like what you're doing, they love the magazine, and it's funny how things can kind of ripple out and you know, definitely kind of keep up the good work. Is there anything you would like to talk about or plug before we go?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't give issue 5 another plug, I think, as it's just gone in the post today. So yeah, I will plug issue 5 of Freelancer magazine. It's great, it feels very nice matte cover, 100 pages, and oh god, I won't be able to find it now, will I?
No.
Well, I should be able to because it's central. But yeah, freelancermagazine.co.uk, and you'll get it delivered directly to your door. And you'll also get to see our first ever
bit higher
double page advertiser.
There we go, perfect.
Yeah, with this very sexy advert, very amazing.
And I had this chat with Angela, is that for me, authenticity is really important. So for instance, my first business when I was a PhD student was a photography business. And the second guy I ever employed was a guy called Jez. And we used to play in the basketball team together. And he never had a job before, but basically he got into photography because he used to do photography events with me. And they're his photos, and now in London.
Oh my God.
And I've said them to Angela, and all the photos that I use on all of the Roadmap stuff, they're my friends' pictures. And I kind of got that when I read the magazine, is that, you know, like, you had Dom the DJ and different people that I guess are your friends.
They were, yeah, he is, yeah.
By the way, easily the coolest couple I'd seen in a long time. I
mean, ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, yeah, I mean, for that first issue, I was just like, who are the most creative people I know, which was, you know, it was very, very cool to be able to do that. And
it's the ability to celebrate your friends. But for me, it's important. But I knew that, Angela, when we're talking about the magazine, I want people to know the backstory, because it's not just a stock image. It's, you know, and I love it. And the other thing as well is that, because you can tell if someone either hires a model or gets a stock image. I wanted authenticity that the magazine has, and it's you know, to kind of bring that to it. What are your socials so people can give you a cheeky follow? So
I'm most active on Twitter and LinkedIn. So @FullyThoughtOut on Twitter, and I think I'm /Sophie Cross on LinkedIn. And then the mag has a few as well. So yeah, the Freelancer magazine, you'll find the page probably on LinkedIn or find it through my page. Same with Twitter. I think it's Freelancer Mags. because it was with a Z on the end.
People
and Freelancer Mag
it
on Insta. Yeah, you'll find it. But yeah, please connect with me. That'd be amazing.
Oh, cool. But genuinely, thank you for your time. I know how busy you are.
Thank you.
I love the fact that each magazine has a playlist, which I think is pretty cool.
It does, yeah.
But it's what I appreciate. It's the depth of thought that goes into the everything. And I think that's, when people essentially buy into a brand and a product, that's what they buy into, the fact that someone cares about it and you've thought about the community and you're doing everything you humanly can to kind of, and I love that. And, I will happily keep doing, supporting and everything and keep up the good work. And
yeah, you've been amazing. It's been incredible. And yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And it's been so nice to chat to you and find out a bit more about you too.
We'll have a wonderful rest of your Monday. And I will continue to follow you on the socials and stuff. Cool.
Thanks, Steve.
Cheers, Sophie. Bye.
Bye.